Hello, beautiful people of the world. I hope your day has been as awesome as you are. Welcome to the Wine and Gist with Monomoxie podcast. My name is Monomoxie, your host, and I am so glad to have you here. Wine and Gist podcast is a safe space for raw, deep, and unfiltered conversations about lifestyle, dating, and relationships today. We've got a lot to talk about, so grab a glass and let's gist. Welcome back, friends. Well, if it's your first time here, welcome to the Gist Pod. I hope you have a marvelous time. And I also hope you have your glass of wine because I've certainly got mine. And this week we're going to get pretty deep. Have you ever felt like you've been in a relationship with a narcissist? Or maybe you're the narcissist in the relationship and you didn't even realize it? Well, this week I want to talk about the red flags that we should see in others, and the red flags that we should take accountability for in ourselves. Because you know what? Nobody's perfect, right? And that includes our own selves. So I want to talk about red flags today and how you can spot them in both yourself and the person that you're potentially dating. If more people took accountability for themselves and their bullshit, the world would be a really, really much better place. But that's just my opinion. So because of that, I believe that it's important to always reflect in oneself to see where maybe you could be the problem. And a lot of times people don't realize their own narcissistic ways, they don't realize their own abusive ways, and they justify it with whatever, they believe is a legitimate reason to act or be a certain way. And I want to point that out today because a lot of times you practically bully someone that you're dating to a point where they do become the devil that you think they are, or that you kept insinuating they are. And I'm not necessarily justifying that either, but I do want to talk about the journey to that devilishness, so to speak. And like I said, accountability, right? Like, how are you yourself in a relationship that maybe it's not your partner? Maybe you're the problem. So red flags. Let's talk about red flags. So as I stated before, in the beginning, not very many people show their truest colors, right? They kind of listen to the person that they're dating and starting to get to know. And through that infatuation, they kind of mold themselves into what they think that person's ideal is, or at least what they think will not scare that person away. And it's when things get a little bit more comfortable that these true colors start to come out. And, everybody has flaws and, there are flaws. And then they're like, okay, no, you have some things to work through, some past issues to work through that you need to heal first from before you proceed with a relationship. Because quite frankly, a lot of people bring so much emotional trauma from previous relationships and just dump it on the new relationship that it's really, really unfair, because all you're doing is destroying somebody who did nothing to destroy you. And you're creating a traumatic experience for them, and essentially becomes a cycle of trauma. It's kind of like the domino effect of trauma. One of the red flags that I really want to talk about that people should look out in both themselves and the person that they're potentially dating is the victim mentality. Someone who consistently has the victim position in every story in their lives. Everyone in their lives has always done them wrong. It's always been someone else's fault. It's always been them who are the innocent party. They always tell the side of the story that makes them look good. They have the victim mentality. That is a huge red flag, because it means that this person is probably very much incapable of taking accountability for their role in things. It takes two to tango, and that is a fact. Now, I definitely acknowledge that these things are very subjective. And in a lot of people's situations, they are the victim to the outcome. I am by no means dismissing that. However, I am a huge advocate for accountability, and I think it's always important to reflect in oneself and see what role we play in the outcome of situations in our lives. Now, when it comes to the victim mentality, it is certainly something to sympathize with, because a lot of times people who suffer from this It's usually because of some trauma that they had in their past that they never really found healthy ways to cope with. And sometimes that develops the victim mentality. And while it is something to sympathize with, it is definitely not something to deal with in a relationship. When I say deal with, I don't mean like, oh, people with victim mentality don't deserve love. That's not what I mean. What I mean by that is it is very, very important to heal from those things. And I want everybody out there to repeat after me. Therapy is not taboo. Therapy is not taboo. Therapy is not taboo. It's brain maintenance, especially when you do have, suppressed trauma or, maybe unsuppressed trauma, any kind of trauma or no trauma at all, right? Like you can see a therapist, you can speak to someone. And if you see one therapist and it doesn't work out, it doesn't mean that, oh, therapy doesn't work. It just means that that particular therapist did not resonate with your problem and did not really resonate with touching the deepness that you need, the depth that you need touched, right? So you can try a different therapist. And a lot of times different therapists have different strategies. They have different ways that they can get you talking and get you to open up. So just try another therapist before, you pick one. So please speak to somebody, go deep into these traumatic events in your life and begin a healing process. And I think that this is very healthy before you get into a relationship, because if not, that's how you carry around that victim mentality of they did me wrong. Oh, I was just this person, I was an angel, or even that you weren't an angel. Sometimes a victim mentality would just be, self-depreciating thoughts where you're like, oh, well, I deserve to be left, or I deserve this, or I deserve that because I'm like this. It's just that negative notion about oneself. That is a mighty, mighty red flag that you should notice in yourself and absolutely notice in the person that you're potentially dating. Another red flag that you should definitely notice, and this one is kind of hard because it wraps you up in the bliss of it that you really don't notice, but you should definitely catch yourself stop yourself in its tracks and pay attention, because this is love bombing, right? And you're probably going, what is love bombing? Well, that is kind of like character catfishing, but in like a maximum form. I'm talking this person is showing up like just serenading you with romance and beautiful things and just, going on trips, having vacation, buying you things, like doing all the love languages, all of them, and just infatuated with you and showering you with all this love. And you guys have been seeing each other for like 2 weeks. There is such a thing as too fast. And I know there are people who are like, oh, I met my husband and we were married 2 weeks later and we've been married for 80 years. And okay, cool. There are the stories that do happen. Very rare, very, very, very rare, but they do exist, right? But let's be realistic here. Okay. That's a little fast for someone to start, just really showering you with so much attention, affection, start to tell you all these things like, wow, I'm so happy I met you. I can't believe you've been missing from my life this whole time. Oh, I don't know what I would do without you. Like, it's like, okay, that's a bit much. We've known each other for about 2 weeks, maybe. That love bombing, and like I said, people who have been in a situation where they felt like they weren't appreciated or were taken for granted or weren't done very nice, fanciful, romantic things in the relationship, you take that in and you love it and you enjoy it and you're just like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. Is this what it's like actually dating a nice guy or a nice girl or whatever the situation is? But you are being love bombed, because the whole idea of that is, and I will explain, it's a huge narcissistic trait, and it is a tactic to possess you, if that makes sense. Love bombing is textbook emotional manipulation. And once you manipulate someone emotionally, you practically start to have some control of them in a huge aspect. And, it's like they start to remember how wonderful you were in the beginning how much you did all these things, how much you blew their mind, how much you were this perfect person that they'd never ever experienced. And they latch onto that, and you almost kind of like throw it at them, like, you're throwing them a line or something, and then you're reeling back in and then see if they're going to swim after it. And that's how a narcissist uses the love bombing thing to keep control, because they'll treat you like shit for a period of time, and then they'll do a grand gesture that reminded you of that sweet blissful moment in the beginning, and you might think like, okay, maybe it was just a period of time, and then they revert back to being controlling a-holes, and then you're like, okay, what the fuck, and then they do something nice again, and you're like, oh yeah, there you go. And that form of emotional manipulation, you start to get used to it, and you start to become comfortable with it, and to a point where you start to believe that, well, you kind of deserve it. And one of my favorite quotes, which is from the movie or book, if you read the book or if you watched the movie, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, one of my favorite quotes from that is, you accept the love you think you deserve. I mean, how fucking deep is that? You accept the love you think you deserve. And when someone walks up into a relationship with you with love bombs, okay, they're captivating you with this blissful romance. You're going to think that, yeah, that's what it is. So every time it's not, you're going to start thinking that maybe you did something wrong. Maybe it's your fault. And you start finding yourself going the extra mile, trying to earn that little line that they throw at you, that fragment of romance that reminds you of the beginning. And then they'll do it. And then you think, oh, I must have been good now. And then they revert back to who they really are. And then you go back to blaming yourself and going an extra mile again because you think it's your fault. And it's just a cycle of manipulation. And so love bombing is actually, you might be thinking like, well, what's wrong with being showered with, grand gestures at the beginning? Like, what's wrong with that? Well, it is a manipulative tactic, and it is in the long run a motive. Even if the person doing it doesn't realize it, because I've said this before, narcissists don't often realize they're narcissists, and they don't often realize they're being narcissists. So sometimes you got to call that shit out. Another red flag to look out for is essentially alienation and isolating you from your loved ones, your friends, your normal life, and they walk into your life and they want to isolate you from these things. And a lot of times they'll use an excuse like, I had a friend who was dating somebody who didn't want him to have female friends because she had a past of a boyfriend who had cheated on her with a female friend. And she carried that on from relationship to relationship and essentially made him alienate and isolate himself from his female friends. He was never allowed to hang out with them, with or without her presence, with or without others present. And, at some point, it obviously did blow up in the relationship. I mean, that among other things. But it does blow up because a person can only deal with that for so long. They can only make so many sacrifices for so long. And the truth is, it's not that you're thinking, okay, I'll just not hang out with my single female friends. Maybe that will solve the problem. Nope. It's never going to be enough. It could be your cousin who's a little attractive and they had a friend from years ago who had a cousin thing from Alabama. Just kidding. But had a cousin thing. And suddenly they're like, I don't want you to hang out with your really pretty cousin because I knew someone. Like it becomes, the point I'm getting at is it never becomes enough. There's always going to be something and you're going to find yourself just giving in. So how much of your life are you going to give up? How much of your life are you going to allow them to alienate you from and isolate you from before you blow up? Because that relationship 100% always blows up. And a lot of times you find yourself going back to recover these relationships. And, some of these people are upset at you. Like, you just kind of did abandon what we had as a friendship over this person that just came into your life and, waved some vagina in your face or waved some dick in your face. and you become this completely different person. And you have to go rebuild friendships that never should have been destroyed in the first place, but you did it to honor this relationship. And little did you know that you were actually being emotionally manipulated. And that's why you were being basically, and like I said, that narcissists don't know they're being narcissists. Because to this person, she was genuinely defending herself. She was genuinely using her past as reason. But I say using her past as reason because that's exactly what it was. Using her past as a reason. If you feel like you have not healed from that, if you feel like you cannot go into a relationship giving that new person a clean slate because they've never done anything to break your trust or put you in that position, then I think that you still need to take time to heal. And which is why I always say a green flag among all the red is when you have someone who is very open and aware about their traumas and they talk about it. They say, hey, I have abandonment issues or I have trust issues, but I'm working through them and I'm doing this to get better at them. So if I act like this, please just kind of call me out on the issues that I have. Or if I act like this, please bear with me. It's because I'm working through living with this traumatic event that I went through. And that to me is a green clean flag. That to me is a green flag because it shows that they are self-aware. They're aware of what's going on. They're aware of their behavior, their mentality, their traumas, and how it affects them in their relationships. And that means that they're actually going to make an active effort to be logical and reasonable, as opposed to the red flag thing where everything is an excuse. Like, oh, I don't want you having female friends because I once had a boyfriend who cheated on me with female friends. I don't want you hanging out with this person because I once experienced this. And it's like, okay, it never will be enough. So honestly, notice this red flag, and like I said, in yourself and in the person that you're dating, and do your best to either run away from it or change it. And changing it, that means the one who notices and notices it in themselves. You can't change people. You really can't. They have to change themselves. So the alienation/isolation red flag kind of goes hand in hand with extreme jealousy and controlling behavior. And these are all, giant red flags and also signs of narcissistic behavior. I mean, I'm talking like narcissistic behavior, like bad narcissistic behavior. Because, honestly, narcissistic behavior isn't always a bad thing, but that's a topic for a whole different episode. It's not always a bad thing, but I think everything can be healthy in moderation. Most things can be healthy in moderation. But anyway, moving on. So the excessive jealousy thing, it's like, there is a level of jealousy that's healthy and, even kind of cute and adorable because it shows that that person is afraid to lose you or doesn't want to lose you. And, it's cute. But then there's like a level of jealousy where it's like, oh, okay, that's a bit scary. That is exhausting. That is mentally just draining and too much to deal with. When you can't even breathe next to somebody and you're being accused of flirting with them. Like you can't even respond to an opposite sex's message on social media. Maybe they're legitimately just like trying to ask a platonic question, but you can't even respond to that because then you're going to get accused of cheating with that person or attempted to cheat with that person. And it's like living in this snow globe or glass bubble of tight rules. Like you can't even really breathe. It's like, oh my gosh, that's eventually going to drown you. And you're either going to be completely drowned or you're going to have to cut loose the ball that is weighing down your chain and float to the surface and move the fuck on. And personally, I suggest the latter because ain't nobody got time for that, right? So another red flag that, you really should look out for this is mostly, I guess, in the person that you're potentially dating, is inconsistency and lack of communication. Like you just You feel like you're constantly on your toes because you don't know what to expect. You don't know what's going to happen. Maybe you thought you guys were meeting tonight at 9, but then the conversation kind of changed around 7 o'clock after you've already planned out the night. And now you're never really sure. But then they're also never just like straightforward with you about things. It's like they're keeping their distance, but reeling you in. And it becomes almost like an addiction, especially when you're going through the infatuation phase with that person. You become like addicted to playing that chase game with them, where it's like, okay, well, today are they going to be? Is it going to be 9 o'clock today, like we talked about, or am I just not going to see them? I'm not just going to wind up seeing them. I mean, I have been in a situation with a friend. Back in the younger college years, a friend of mine was in something like this with a guy, and it's like she would get dressed up, get dolled up, and thinking that they've made plans to meet up that night, and then he just like doesn't respond for hours after that, and then responds like in the middle of the night and apologizes for some reason. And it wasn't even because like he was working or what is like, even if that was the case, he just wasn't communicating that with her, so she was constantly second guessing what was going on. And I was just like, girl, that is exhausting, right? Someone who is inconsistent and doesn't communicate is just, nobody has time for that, right? I think people can be straightforward with you, even if they're just trying to have a fling or trying to have a little part-time thing, or, just be real about it. Talk about it and be straight with people and say, yeah, this is what's going on. Let people know. What's the big deal? I never understood it. But the inconsistent thing and not knowing what to expect, not knowing what's going to happen, thinking that you have plans, but turns out you really don't. It's like you're going back, and it's like in a form of, it's like a form of gaslighting too, because you start to second guess yourself that maybe you're reading in between the messages. Maybe you're not reading what they're saying. Maybe they're not really into you, but you think that they are. But then you start going back over the messages and asking yourself like, well, what does this mean? When they said this, that definitely means that they're into me, right? And that's exactly what this friend of mine was going through with me. Sitting there going, well, this means that they're into me, right? This means that he's interested, right? But then we make this plan, and then I think that here's the plan. And it's just like, oh my God, girl, please drop him like hot fucking potato. Personally, I couldn't deal with that because one of the biggest traits I value the most in a partner and in a man is the ability to just honestly communicate with me. Tell me what's going on. Open up and just lay it flat. None of this beating about the bush or lying by your mission or hiding things or, just lay the fuck out. Tell me what's up. Communicate with me. If you feel like, what, I'm just having a shitty day and I don't know what's going on and I just feel like taking it out on all the people around me, say that. I mean, I'm talking transparent communication. I value that in a partnership because that's who I am. I am a transparent communicator. I can sit here and I'm just having a rough day and I'm just firing shots at my husband, and he'll just sit there like, what the fuck did I do? And then, I'll have to like catch myself and say, you know what? I'm just having a shitty day and you're the closest person to me that can take the shots right now. Complete, honest, transparent communication. Like to that deep extent. I value that in a partnership. So I never, ever, ever bargained with that. So whenever I saw friends of mine or other people dealing with inconsistent people who are not communicating with them, and they never know where they stand, they never know what's going on, I'm like, nope. I can't deal with that. Like my control freakness cannot deal with that. I need to know what the fuck to expect and what's going on. Am I moving on or are we doing something here? That was always me. And I still value that to this day. And even in my marriage, true, honest, transparent communication. So last but certainly not least of the red flags that I'm going to talk about on this episode is people who very casually and comfortably cross your boundaries and then blame you for retaliating against that, or for at least, realigning your boundaries and saying, you can't cross this. And you can often tell that early on in relationships too. And a lot of times they'll mask it as spontaneity or cuteness. Like maybe you tell someone, you're seeing someone and you tell them, I can't hang out tonight. I have a really early morning. I have to go to bed. Maybe I'll see you tomorrow. And then they decide to show up at your door anyway. But they brought flowers and some takeout. And they said, yeah, I know you're tired. You say you're tired, but I just wanted to stop by and drop off these flowers for you and food. Mask it in the form of sweetness. But that is them crossing a boundary. That's them. They wanted to see you tonight. And they decided that whether you liked it or not, they were going to see you tonight. Sure, you said no. Well, they can't just burst up into your apartment or your house or whatever the situation is, wherever you live, your hut, your teepee, whatever. They can't just bust up in there and say, whatever, man, I'm here. No, so they're going to find a way to mask their intrusion, so to speak. Yes, you're seeing this person. Yes, you guys are actively dating, but you asked for them to give you space. You said, I have something going on in the morning. I'd really just like to get some rest tonight. But they decided to ignore that and showed up anyway because they wanted to get what they wanted. But like I said, because they masked it by bringing flowers and some takeout, pretending that they were just being, I guess, sweet towards you or considerate towards you. And a lot of times they're not even pretending. Maybe in their own minds, they really do believe that's what it is, which is why part of this episode talks about catching your own self during these red flags and calling yourself out on them. But playing the I'm being the sweet and considerate person card in order to cover up the fact that no, you're actually crossing their boundaries. You're actually not giving a shit that they asked you for space. Right now, you decided that you're going to see them anyway. And you decided that, but you're going to be sweet, quote unquote, about it. That was just one of the many, many ways that someone you're dating crosses your boundaries so comfortably and casually. And sometimes they realize that they are, sometimes they don't. Just little things that you express yourself on and then maybe just dismiss in a cute way or dismiss in a sweet way. It's never directly vindictive or mean or assertive in an uncomfortable way. It's always just a passing sweetness or a passing calmness with it, like, oh, please stop. It's not a big deal kind of thing. And that matters when you express yourself and express that you don't like certain things or you don't want to have to put up with certain things or you're not comfortable with certain things. And it's met with just a soft, sweet dismissal. That is someone who does not respect your boundaries, and that is a giant red flag. Listeners, you have reached the end of episode 5. Red flags you should never ignore. Tell me what you think. Per usual, I love feedback. Please comment, share, subscribe, follow on Instagram and Facebook. You can find us on YouTube at Wine and Gist Pod. You can send us an email if you have any feedback that you want to talk about, if you have any topics that you'd like us to explore. We love all kinds of feedback from all our listeners. Until next time, my beautiful people, go ahead and be great.